The news feed late night, your reporting continues. It's dubbed the first of its kind, a project for transformation called Social Justice and Nation Movement. And heading that, of course, is Advocate Dumisa Ntsebeza. Sports, Arts and Culture Minister Nathi Mthethwa recently emphasized that the transformation within Cricket South Africa will not be negotiated. The minister slammed the body for obstructing calls for change. Hence, he appointed an ombudsman to look into that process, and that ombudsman joins us now. Advocate Dumisa Ntsebeza, good evening, and thank you very much for your time tonight here on the news feed late night. Now, it seems you are hitting the ground running with these submissions. Initially, you had thought you would want to see submissions being done and dusted by the end of April. You've had a sift through. What is your impression? Have you got enough submissions?
Well, it depends on what enough is enough. I have submissions, but the nature of these submissions are that I need to do some follow-ups. And therefore, when originally I thought that the end of April is the date, is the D-date. In other words, I would stop getting any submissions beyond that date. I have found it is important and necessary because, you know, human beings, when people have got a deadline, they will wait until the very last moment and then start to now try and meet the deadline. And when they miss the deadline, they will cry foul.
Yeah.
So from the 13th to the 30th, which is just the month that is ended, we received submissions from current players, former players, regional cricket, and other interested bodies, etc., etc. Right now, I'm going through, a submission very, very, very detailed by the AfriForum, and that gives me an idea that it may well be that other, organizations in the area in which the AfriForum, propagates its viewpoints, may have to be invited also to make submissions.
So, for example, with the submissions that were conducted on the land process, right, you found that organizations gathered information and content from various community groups, and they made that as one submission, and I suppose they had some legal advice, and they were able to couch this nicely and in a more professional way. Do you think maybe people within the cricket space feel intimidated by the process?
Well, there are who have said or have asked me whether there are going to be any guarantees against victimization, especially those who belong to the current player category. There has been some expression of concern that no sooner will they have testified or have come to my process to give their side of the story of their victimhood, then they will subtly or not so subtly be victimized. And they sort of ask from me whether I can guarantee their safety from victimization. And it's something that I am currently pondering because it's a matter of concern. This is a matter where I am trying my best to make sure that if there are going to be things that are said by those who make submissions, which are detrimental to the interests of those about whom certain complaints are made, then I will I will implement the process in terms whereof those who are mentioned against their own interests, in other words, to their detriment, have an opportunity to respond to the claims of victimization that would come out of those submissions.
Now, the announcement, of course, of your... sorry, let me just come in here. The announcement of yourself as the ombudsman was made fairly recently. I don't know how far back you've had the conversation with the minister and so on and so forth. But do you have a particular perspective, a view, an idea of what you hope this process will yield?
You know, is it Thabo?
Yes.
Yes. You know, you will probably know that I had been approached previously by the so-called old board of CSA. And in my scheme of things, when I accepted the position of transformation ombudsman, I had imagined that this would be something that would take place over a period of 2 years. But the new board, or what came to be known as the interim board, after I had been asked to, put things on hold, came with a view that I must do a very quick job. I must, from beginning to end, try and do this project in a period of 6 months. Now, it seems to me to be an impossible job, but in conversations which I had with the interim board, I realized that though it may not be what I would have imagined or what I would have wanted, it's doable. Yeah. And because what this inquiry might amount to is a broad brush against the canvas, where I would get to hear all the voices of those who may even say, why do we need transformation? Cricket is transformed. You should have seen cricket in the 1990s. It was far worse untransformed than it is today. That's one perspective. There may be a perspective from those who say, no. So such transformation, as others say there is not even up to the mark. It has not even scratched the surface. Yeah. Now, I need to hear all those voices. That's why I say I don't want to get into this, into the hearings that I'm planning with predetermined views as to what transformation amounts to. I will need those who have dared to say we're making submissions. Firstly, they will have to say, this is our view of what transformation is. Right. And that will include ministers, present and past ministers, your Mbalulas, your Balfours, and of course, I will approach even the current minister. And as you say, he is very strong about transformation. Yeah. I will have to ask and find out what his view of what transformation is. And, and then compare it before I make my recommendations. Right. And I write my report with the views of those who say, you are just introducing politics into sport. Yeah. And you are, and the sporting code is running the gauntlet of being disqualified by SASCO or by the Olympic Committee.
You're mentioning the ministers here. One would say, is your focus going to be largely national? Are you going to be looking at provincial cricket as well? You inviting even maybe the presidents of the various associations? Are you looking forward to hearing from them?
In fact, I have a meeting this week, I think it will be on Zoom, where hopefully I would be able to get the CEOs and or presidents of the various, provincial cricket structures, and where I would seek their cooperation. For instance, my original idea was that I would be traveling to get hearings at several places, whether it's Limpopo or KZN or Eastern Cape, Western Cape, the Free State, etc., etc. That would have been the ideal thing. But now we I mean, these plans keep on changing, Thabo, from day to day because we are constrained for time. What I had planned having in mind a sort of 18 to 24 months period has to be done now in a period of 6 months. But it is doable because I might end up getting a sample of opinion from the Western Cape. And thanks to today's platforms, you and I are speaking to each other as though I'm in your studios. Yeah. And yet, we have been saying that because, we are using this platform.
Right.
So this platform will largely be used for the ends that I thought I would get if I were to travel around the country.
It's not the first conversation or even the first attempt at transforming cricket South Africa, and I'm sure you will hear from the previous ministers how they've also attempted. And it's quite interesting that every time you speak of the transformation of any sport really in South Africa, particularly those which are viewed as white-dominated, the immediate thing that many people go to, they say, oh, there we go, another conversation about quotas again. I mean, is this really about quotas? I mean, you're saying your conversation, your focus is really broad, in fact, in as far as trying to unite the sport.
Yeah, well, I would have liked to think that it is not only transformation of the cricketers in the field of play, even though that's largely what it should be. I mean, this Black Lives Matter engendered some reactions from our cricketers, and they demonstrated, how they aligned themselves with the BLM movement, precisely because they felt the pinch. But then it is seeking to, this inquiry of mine, seeks to, to examine the levels of unfair discrimination, whether it was in the field of play, whether it was in the selection, whether it was in management, whether it was in coaches, so that one gets a rounded sense as to whether discrimination ran deep, for how long, and what it was intended to achieve, and whether then that has been achieved. The proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating. As I say, whenever I hold these kinds of news interviews, I always say to myself, I should not be misinterpreted by those, who think that I have got a predetermined view as to what the outcome is going to be, to saying, oh yeah, what's the point of Ntsebeza coming, to do these inquiries? Because we can already tell that he has got a viewpoint.
Right.
I want a rounded view of what the issues are. That is why I will want to call all the ministers, including the ministers who were ministers in 1991.
Right.
When there were these so-called unity talks.
Advocate, I appreciate your time as always, and thank you very much for coming through. Cricket South Africa's transformation ombudsman, Advocate Dumisa Ntsebeza.